So while we're on the topic of cell mitosis, let's talk about cancer, because basically cancer is when a cell is dividing and mitosis has gone amok, right? It's just a normal cell that for some reason its cell reproduction has just gone crazy. So one of the things about cancer is you always hear people talk, well, not always, but you hear people talk about cancer. So what exactly is cancer? If somebody has lung cancer, we're like, oh my God, person's got lung cancer. But cancer begins at the cell level. So what happens is it's one of the cells or a number of cells in the lung that has become cancerous. And then it may affect, we may say it's lung cancer, but it's the cells of the lung that actually are cancerous. And cancer cells are normal cells that have lost the ability to function properly. So they just start off as normal cells, and for some reason, there's some reasons that we know, they've lost the ability to function properly. And basically what has happened is your normal cells have lost control over cell division. So your cells have lost control over cell division. Now, when cells keep dividing over and over and over again, cancer cells, they form a mass that's called a tumor. So when you hear people talk about a tumor, it's a mass of cells. Now, cancer cells are different than normal cells. Once that normal cell has gone cancerous, things really start to change. They start to do a lot of bad things, these little cancer cells. One thing that happens is if you scrape your knee, always using that example, those cells divide enough to just fill in where the lost cells are. So it's like if you had a hole and you're filling in the hole with dirt. You'd kind of stop once you filled in the hole. But nope, not cancer cells. They do not stop dividing when they touch other cells. Normal cells, once they're touching each other, will stop dividing. Nope, not cancer cells. They just keep dividing and forming a great big mumbo-jumbo mass of cells. So cancer cells do not stop dividing when touching other cells. The other thing about cancer cells is they divide a lot faster. We said normal human cells divide about every 24 hours, depending on the type of cell that it is. Cancer cells will divide faster than 24 hours. So this is why we can use some of those anti-cancer drugs to kill the cancer cells, because it will only target cells that are dividing really, really quickly. But that also includes things like your hair cells that divide really, really quickly. So these cancer cells divide faster, so less than 24 hours. Now, another thing that happens with cancer cells, or with normal cells, I should say, is that they don't like to divide alone. If you have a regular human cell sitting in a petri dish, you can have all the nutrients in the world in there, perfect temperatures, perfect lighting, everything is perfect. If it's by itself, it just dies. It cannot survive. It needs to have other cells around it in order to divide again. So with a cancer cell, though, nope. You can have a lone cancer cell just sitting on its own and it's going to divide quite happily. And it's one of the reasons why cancer can spread, because you can have one little cell that leaves a cancerous tumor, spreads to somewhere else, or goes through the bloodstream to somewhere else and then sets up shop there. So when they're doing surgery, they have to be really, really careful that they get as much of the cancerous mass. They take normal tissue from around as well to make sure that they get every single solitary little cell that's there. So these guys, again, divide alone, not normal cells. Now, if you remember back to characteristics of life, we said that cells, they specialize. So they differentiate and they specialize. So you start off as a little wee sperm and egg that have fused, and over the course of time we've got some of your cells have formed into muscle cells, some have formed into bone cells, some have formed into nerve cells, and they start to do the job that they're supposed to do. So muscle cells actually like flex and help burn glucose for heat and energy. You get your nerve cells that are conducting nervous impulses. You get your bone cells that are going to be there for structure. But nope, not cancer cells. They don't change shape, so they don't change into the shape of bone cells or nerve cells or anything like that. And they don't specialize. All they do is just sit there as blobs in that tissue. So they do not change shape and specialize like normal cells would. Now, our cells, the normal cells, what they're going to do is they're going to use food and they're going to use oxygen, of course, for respiration and for growth and cell division, but they're also going to be producing proteins or building new cell membranes or whatever it is that the cell does, conducting electrical impulses if it's in the case of a nerve cell. But nope, 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 not cancer cells. The only thing they do is use that food and oxygen for growth and cell division. They don't do anything else that they're supposed to do, or that they originally did as they were normal cells. They've just given it up just to grow and divide. So all their food and energy go into growth and division. The other interesting thing that cancer cells do is they send signals to your blood stream to tell the bloodstream to build blood vessels into the tumor. So the cancer cells are getting a supply of blood, which is bringing the glucose and the oxygen into them all the time. So it signals blood vessels to grow into the tumor. So again, when surgeons are removing a tumor, they have to be really, really careful to cauterize or to shut off all those blood vessels that are leading into that tumor. Another thing that cancer cells do that regular cells don't is they do this thing that's called metastasis, or they metastasize. So this is when they can move to other areas. So you can have, just like I said earlier, a little piece that breaks off, travels through the bloodstream, and then sets up shop somewhere else. Now that doesn't happen for a normal cell. Like, it's not like you swallow your cheek cells and then all of a sudden your cheek cells set up shop in your stomach. All right, our cells only can grow where they're supposed to be, but a cancer cell, nope, it can metastasize, which means it moves to another area. So when you hear people say, oh my gosh, the cancer has metastasized, that means it's moved to a secondary spot, which usually means the cancer is spreading. And the last thing about cancer cells is, remember we were talking about a regular cell, it does apoptosis, it's got programmed cell death. So they only live for so long, and then they, like all living organisms, you live for so long, and then it's just time for you to go. So it's the same thing with regular normal cells. But cancer cells, oh, nope, they're immortal. They just keep living and living and living and living and living. Alrighty? So next slide I'm going to show you is a little bit of interesting history. This woman, Henrietta Lacks, she died in 1951. You can see here beside her name the word HeLa cells. So what happened with her, she was obviously a poor black woman in Baltimore, and she had a very aggressive cervical cancer. She was married, of course, and had, plenty of children. And she was going to Johns Hopkins University for treatment for this. It was one of the few hospitals that would treat black people at that time. I should say Johns Hopkins Hospital. Anyway, her cells, they took, without permission, they took her cells and they were able to grow them in the lab. Now, up until this time, even the cancer cells, growing them in petri dishes was very, very difficult, and they would die out after a while. Well, her cells, probably because whatever genetic makeup these cancer cells had, they were just really, really aggressive, really, really tough. Her cells have been used for cancer research for years and years and years. When I was in university in 4th year, in my cell and tissue culture, we actually used HeLa cells, like the cancer cells, to test all sorts of different drugs on these cancer cells to see what would happen. The sad thing about this, again, is they didn't ask for her permission for it. They took her, once they were able to figure out the genome, so what her genes are like, they've shared that information with the world, with scientists, which is a good thing, but they never asked permission from the family if they were allowed to do that. And probably, I don't know obviously don't know the family personally, but when you read about them, this sounds like they're very kind and caring people. They probably would have said, yes, for sure, share this with the world, maybe we can cure cancer, because she died when she was just, I think, 43 or 41 or something like that. And with all the money that companies have made using her cells, her family has never received any money for it. So it's again, a little indication of how poorly black people were treated and still are treated in a lot of areas of the world. There's a really neat movie called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks, and it's also a book. So if you're ever interested in anything like this, a little bit of history, it's a good little movie to watch. I think Oprah's in it. I know I watched it, but I don't really remember if she was in it or not. It doesn't matter. Anyway, Also really, really interesting cancer research. There are other cell lines now that are used, but hers was kind of like one of the originals. So here's what normal cells look like. So we just said with normal cells, like they're, these guys are spaced quite nicely out. They're all sort of polite with each other. This is the nucleus. The little dark part in here is the nucleus. Remember we said a nucleus, when it's not dividing, the genetic material is all long and tangled, at least it looks long and tangled to our eyes, and we call it chromatin, because you can see how this has taken up the stain to have a dark blue color. And if you can see closely, you can see like one, maybe two nucleoli in the nucleus of the cell. So these are nice kind of normal cells. Here's one that's sitting here on its own. Alrighty, it's just being separated. It's because this slide is not multiplying on its own. It's just separate from this little clump that was put under the microscope. Well, if you take a look here, we've got our cancer cells. So see how these guys are all clumping really, really close together. Look at the nucleoli in here. We've got a large number of nucleoli in here. Right, here's one with 4. This white thing doesn't mean anything. It's kind of like it's just a reflection because they used a different type of light to make this these slides show up really, really well. See, this one's got 2 nuclei in it, and it hasn't separated. Like the nucleus is separate, but the cells themselves haven't separated. If this was a normal cell at this point with the nucleus back, it would be at the end of telophase, and this would be 2 separate cells here. So these are cancer cells, what the cancer cells look like. Here again, you can see nice side by side. Here's nice organized cells. All right, again, they've been stained, so you can see them kind of like, I'm not going to say they're perfectly lined up in perfect rows, because nothing in biology is ever perfectly organized. But you can see here the nucleus, they're all misshapen. These cells are misshapen. They've got weird shaped nuclei, so they're not looking too keen here. This is kind of a neat electron micrograph picture of cancer cells as well. Cancer cells also have these long strings that and lots of them, so they're communicating with each other like, hee, let's go over here, and it helps them all attach to each other to form that nice tight tumor. It also helps them crawl along. If you see cancer cells in real life, like on the petri dish, they will crawl along the petri dish. All right. Here's another picture showing the misshapen cells and the misshapen nuclei, and you've got 2 nuclei in some of the cells. All right, they're a real mess. So let's talk about the causes of cancer. All right, there's so many rumors around cancer because, again, it's difficult for a lot of people to understand exactly what cancer is, especially if they are uneducated, or they dumped everything they've ever learned about cells out of their mind, all right? Because it is a scary thing. You hear about people with cancer and bam, they're dead. So some people have a genetic predisposition. There are some people that just in their families carry genes for cancer. There's a breast cancer gene that women can be tested for, and some people I know one of my friends actually opted to have her breast removed. Actually, 2 people I know have opted to have their breasts removed rather than wait for cancer to develop in them. One of the first people I'd ever heard doing this was Angelina Jolie. She tested positive for the breast cancer gene, got her breast removed, got reconstructive surgery done, and looks fantastic. So genetic predisposition means you have an inheritance of defective genes. All right, it just runs in the family. Now, the next thing that happens is sometimes there's just a random mutation. We're going to talk about mutations in a minute, but basically a mutation is when your genetic material for some reason just changes. All right, it just happens. Rapidly dividing cells, there's always a chance that something is going to happen when they divide. So it's just a random mutation. And who knows, maybe at some point, maybe somebody in this class who might go into cell research, maybe it's not so random. Maybe you'll discover, nope, we used to think it's random, but this is what's actually happened. You can have exposure to a carcinogen. So this term here means cancer, and ogen means causing or the beginning of. So this means you've been exposed to some type of cancer-causing substance. A lot of times diet and lifestyle, if you've got a really crappy diet, you don't exercise, you know, again, you've got your smoke, right now they don't know too much about vaping or, you know, the different types of vaping that people do. You know, they're very worried that this may lead to lung cancer. Smoking marijuana also has a really, really high, you know, people are always worried about smoking cigarettes, but marijuana, same thing, right? Never know, diet and lifestyle here. And sometimes you can have, I know a couple people who, I don't know them anymore because they've died, you know, very healthy, running all the time, outdoor people, and ended up with cancer, right? And then there's, again, kind of along with random mutations, sometimes we just don't know what causes cancer. There's so many questions that are still out there for what causes cancer. And again, big, huge world of research out there if you're interested in something like that. So just talked about what a mutation is, so let's explain what a mutation is. So a mutation basically is a change in the genetic code. Now, when you get into grade 11, you'll learn a lot more about the genetic code. But the genetic code in your DNA is made up of 4 different types of compounds. They're called bases, right? There's only 4. So with those 4 different types of bases, we've got millions and millions and millions of different pieces of information. So, but each of those codes is specific. It's like if you try to phone a friend, which I know you guys just like hit a number on text. I know I don't even know my own kids' phone numbers anymore. But in the olden days when you had to actually dial a number, if you put the wrong number in, all right, you would get something messed up. Same thing if you're trying to put your password in or your password in and you hit the wrong number or something like that, or hit the wrong letter. So for some reason, there's a change in the genetic code. Now, if we put the wrong password in, it just tells us password is not right. But if you have a change in a genetic code, sometimes it can be harmful to the organism. Sometimes it can be helpful. So sometimes you change the genetic code and whoop, the organism's actually stronger than it used to be. Or sometimes you get a change in the genetic code and nothing happens at all, right? So basically a mutation can be harmful, neutral, which means nothing happens to the organism, or helpful. Now, what happens a lot of times is the cell, what it does is it fixes some of those mutations during interphase. So that's another thing that it's doing during interphase. It's looking at all those code, all that DNA code, and making sure that everything is still properly coded. Right? So it's going through and making sure if there was a change somewhere that it's being fixed. Now, if you expose yourself to the sun a lot while you're still young, what happens in your cells is those mutations that are being caused by the sun are being fixed a lot of times while you're still young. While you're still young and healthy, it's being fixed. Right? But as you age, as time goes on, our bodies kind of slow down. So, you know, you get a little bit older, you get to be 10 years old and 11 years old and stuff like that. And your little mutations that are being caused by the sun aren't getting fixed so often. And then next thing you know, you're up in your 30s and your 40s and you've got age spots all over your face or potentially skin cancer. So it's really, really, really important to make sure that you're covered and you have sunscreen on while you're still young, because those skin cancer things won't show up till you're older when your body can't fix those little mutations anymore. All right, and so why a mutation may cause cancer is because it changes how the cell divides. If it's going to change something and it changes how the cell divides, it may not tell the cell, all right, it's time to stop and rest for a little bit. It may just tell the cell, time to keep going. It's like it takes the brakes out of the cell. Okay, next slide here. We're going to talk about what a carcinogen is. So I already said a carcinogen is something that causes cancer. So if we were in class and I was writing this on the board, I would tell you to write it down. But so it'd probably be a good idea to write, you know, circle it, put cancer, ogen, causing. So a carcinogen is basically any type of substance that can cause cancer in a living tissue or in living tissue. So a substance which can cause cancer in living tissue. And some of the carcinogens that we know of right now include things like, well, types of carcinogens are viruses. So you know that most people hopefully get the HPV vaccine. It used to only be for girls. Now I think the boys are getting it as well. The HPV, the human papillomavirus, there's hundreds of human papillomaviruses. There's some that are very, very aggressive and cause cervical cancer or penile cancer, or not even just cervical cancer, can also cause anal cancer, right? It's a human papillomavirus is one that we've all been exposed to. If anyone's ever had a wart, you've had human papillomavirus. It's one type of human papillomavirus, but you know, we want to be immune to these ones that can cause cancer. So what they've done is they've made a vaccine that will help fight off these cancer-causing human papillomaviruses. It's really, really important that you do get vaccinated. There's a lot of rumors around about it, not so much anymore, but when it first came out, there were rumors around that it caused infertility. People were worried that if their children got this human papillomavirus, they would go out and be having sex with all sorts of people. It simply wasn't true. Right? What it's done, they found in Australia already, is that it's massively cut down on the amount of cervical cancer that's being suffered by young women. There was a young girl in my class a few years ago, same age as my oldest son, 23. She didn't get the human papillomavirus. Her parents didn't believe in it. And she actually died, I think, 2 years ago of cervical cancer. She had a very, very aggressive form of human papillomavirus, and it literally killed her. I'm also not sure how quickly she got chemotherapy and stuff like that. It seemed like they were on top of that, but I also don't know about this family. But I also know another mom around my age, which will never be disclosed, who did have cervical cancer when she was younger. They did manage to fight it. So it's just something you don't want. And if you ever read stories of people who have had anal cancer, what a brutal area in the world to have cancer. All right. So please, please, you know, don't get taken up in the hysteria and the lack of proper information. Talk to a healthcare professional. Talk to people at the health unit. They're not there. There's no big conspiracy by anybody to try to implant anything into you or cause sterility in all young people. People go into these jobs as being doctors or nurses or healthcare professionals because they want to actually help people. There's no evil plan to go out and hurt people. Okay, enough of my grandstanding right there. All right, things like radiation. Remember we talked yesterday about X-rays and gamma rays. And again, if you have to get an X-ray because you've broken something, you're not going to die of cancer within the next year. All right, it's a very, very low dose. It would be people who, shop, and not so much in Canada because we do keep, kind of care of. It's not easy to just walk in and ask for an X-ray, but in other places where you can go and ask for X-rays, you can end up with cancer. When they first discovered X-rays, it was like a big party trick to take an X-ray machine to a party and people would X-ray themselves. And even the technicians that were first using the X-ray machines were X-raying their hands all the time and all sorts of stuff and really caused themselves some serious damage. And there's your UV rays that are in there. So you don't want to spend a whole lot. You do need a little bit of sunshine to produce vitamin D, especially in Northern Ontario, especially in Canada. You do need some sun exposure, but it's like 10 minutes a day in the summer. The wintertime, you barely get any vitamin D production, so you should be taking some vitamin D, but we don't want to expose ourselves to unnecessary radiation. So do wear your sunscreen in the summertime. Now, also hazardous chemicals. So if you're cigarettes, and again, we don't know exactly what's happening with vapes yet, marijuana, smoke, pesticides. So there's all sorts of hazards. Benzene, a lot of the big industrial cleaners that they use for you wouldn't have in your home, but they used to use benzene all the time in chemistry labs. So you would be able to clean out your equipment with benzene, and it's a great cleaner, but it's also carcinogenic. So they stopped that at universities. So let's go through some of the myths, all right, about cancer. So I'm kind of going to go through this quickly, but you can just jot down these things really quickly as well. So deodorants and bras do not cause breast cancer. Right? Even if you want to write deodorants and bras and put a big slash through them, that's fine. You don't need to write down the whole entire sentence. You're going to hear people go on and on and on about the aluminum deodorants causes cancer. It doesn't. There's been absolutely no research that shows that at all. Right? People are always worried about microwaving their foods. remember we talked about microwaves very briefly, and we said microwaves they're a lot slower, so they can't get into your cells. All they do is they shake up the water molecules that are in your food. They get them moving really, really fast, and that will heat the food particles that are beside it. And you may notice if you try to heat up a piece of paper, it doesn't really work. Well, one time I was going to say, if you heat up a piece of paper, it doesn't heat up. And then I was thinking, wait, one time I put a newspaper on fire, but I put it's such a stupid story, but I put the newspaper in the microwave for a couple seconds because it was wet and I thought I could dry it really quickly. I put the doggone thing on fire. So don't do that. All right. But if you're using a microwave safely, right, it's all sealed up, the doors are closed, and you're using microwave safe plastics, you're fine. Or you're using glassware, you should be fine. You're not going to get cancer from using a microwave. One of the big things is that people will say that sugar causes cancer, or that sugar causes cancer cells to grow faster. Not true at all. So people will be like, oh, I'm on the carb-free, I'm on a sugar-free diet to prevent cancer, or they have cancer and then they cut sugar or carbs totally out of their diet because they've been told that. When you're getting cancer therapy, you need to eat food. You need to eat as much food as you possibly can. And I'm not saying go buy a bag of candy, but sometimes if you're having chemotherapy and it's all you can do is to suck on some candies to get some nutrients in your body, for heaven's sakes, you have to do it. So sugar does not make cancer cells grow faster. Right? People are all worried about genetically modified organisms. So, and they'll go, oh, they're cancer causing all sorts of things. Nope, not true. Never. There's no evidence showing that at all. We talked about this one a little bit yesterday. I hope I don't repeat this on the next slide, but cell phones or cell towers do not cause cancer. Remember, they're those great big radio waves. They can't get into your cells, penetrate into the nucleus of the cell, and pound up that DNA. Like, I wish, who knows what's happening next week, but when you see how teeny tiny your cells are, all right, and you figure radio waves are the size of buildings, there's no way that a radio wave can get into your cell and bash up that DNA. It doesn't even make an ounce of sense. Okay. Another myth is people will say, oh my God, cancer's on the rise, cancer's on the rise. It's not. Cancer rates are actually decreasing because we know so much more about what causes cancer. Like I said, you don't get to use benzene in the lab anymore. All right. If you go up to university, you're not going to be cleaning your glassware with benzene. We know how bad smoking is for you. We understand about ultraviolet rays. So people are taking care of their skin a lot earlier than they used to. The only place where there is a rise of cancer seems to be in children, and that's probably because now with vaccinations and with better medical care, children aren't dying as much under the age of 5. Okay, so that's it's a myth that cancer is not on the rise, but it is a little bit true when we talk about children, but that can also be attributed to children just living now where before they used to die when they were quite young. Okay, artificial sweeteners do not cause cancer. So if you have a diet pop or something, you're not going to die of cancer. The one research that was done years ago on saccharin force-fed rats massive amounts of saccharin. Right, that was basically their diet. Well, I think anybody would develop some type of cancer if you were only fed one type of food your whole entire life. Right? People say a lot of time, oh, no wonder that person got cancer because they're so negative. Your attitude does not cancer. Your attitude will sometimes affect how you get through cancer treatment or how you deal with a diagnosis of cancer. So it's going to, you can either take it as really, really bad news, or you can take it as, all right, I'm going to get my life in order and let's just get on this. But your attitude does not cause cancer. Right? Another one, hair dye does not cause cancer. You probably don't want to get into your eye or anything like that, or, and there was always warnings on the boxes. Not that I would know what a box of hair dye even looks like. But anyway, it always tells you not to wax your eyebrows or facial hair or anything with hair dye. So you need a special type of dye for that because it can cause some serious injury to other parts of your body that's not meant for, but it's not going to cause cancer. All right, and the biggie, the last one, there absolutely is no secret cure for cancer. It's just absolutely not true. Think of a secret that you have and you tell a friend, all right? How many times has that secret gotten out? right? You can't even trust your friends to keep a secret. Maybe some of you can. You're really, really good friends. But I know I even tell secrets. My husband will tell me something. When my friend and I are on a hike, I'll tell her the little secret, depending on what it is, of course. All right, so it's not like they've had all these scientists, all these doctors, all these nurses that are all able to hold this secret in their mouths and never tell anyone. If you look at Steve Jobs died of cancer. Steve Jobs was probably one of the richest people on earth. If Steve Jobs can't buy the secret cure of cancer from somebody, then no one can. So there definitely is no secret cure for cancer. Alrighty, and you're also going to be bombarded through your life with like garlic cures cancer and ginger cures cancer. When we get to the next few slides about how many different types of cancer there are, you're going to know there is no secret cure for cancer. I'm sorry, I just realized what a long video this is. So if you feel like you need to take a break, absolutely go ahead. All right, so what types of tumors do we have? Well, we've got benign tumors. So you might hear people going, oh my gosh, thank God the tumor was benign, right? So this is a harmless tumor. So anybody who's had a wart, you've had a tumor. Alrighty. It has a low rate of mitosis. The warts do spread, but it's not like they spread massively all over the place. All right, and when you look at a benign tumor under the microscope, it's fairly organized. Okay, it's cells that have they've tampered with going bad, but they haven't quite. Where if you have a malignant tumor, so this is the type of tumor that is the bad one you don't want to hear about. This is one of those ones that has gone completely crazy, and they are growing, and it completely crowds out normal cells. So this is where you're going to get a big clump. So this is a malignant tumor, is a type of tumor that grows until it crowds out normal cells. Alrighty? And if you've got a tumor in your lungs or in your stomach or in your esophagus or something, it's going to interfere with vital organs. So this is why, well, besides it's going to spread everywhere, but this is where it starts to cause a problem. Alrighty? And the other thing that these bad little tumors do is because your body's trying to fight it. The cancer cells, they're so interesting. They're so sneaky because on the outside of them, they've got like your regular normal cell. They kind of look like a regular normal cell on the outside, but inside they're all bad. And your normal cells don't know, your normal white blood cells, they're like, well, what the heck is this? Is this a normal cell or is this a bad cell? Like, what do we do? So it actually decreases the body's ability to fight disease because your they're trying to figure out, do we kill this cancer cell? Okay, let's go in there and try to kill this thing, but we don't know what we're doing. And then meanwhile, you end up with all sorts of other diseases because your body has been distracted by these crazy malignant cancer cells. Alrighty, so we're going to take a picture of, we're going to take a look at. So which of these two samples shows a benign tumor and a malignant tumor? Alrighty, so now a lot of people go, well, that looks fairly organized. I think I like that kind of thing. And this one looks a big mess. Well, this one here, all right, these guys, despite not looking organized, basically are organized. These guys are all clumped all over each other. There's a great big mess. So this is your malignant tumor, and this is your benign tumor. All right, because if you look at these, well, it's hard, I can't zoom in here, but if you look at these cells, these are a little bit more organized while they're in there. The nuclei are smaller. These guys, if we could zoom in again, the nuclei would be a lot bigger. These cells are clumping all over each other as well, okay, in the malignant tumor. All right, if you look here, and this one here, all right, this here, which one is the benign tumor, which one's the malignant tumor? Okay, this is a nice little organized ball of cells. So this is like a little, these are just undifferentiated cells that are just, causing a little lump there. Sometimes you just have little lumps that are being taken out. Where this is a big spreading mass of, you can see this is a 5 centimeter mass of horribleness. Alrighty, so next slide. Oops, sorry, I forgot about the benign and malignant. So what type of cancers can you have? Or not, hopefully you will never have. Alrighty, there are more than 200 types of cancer. So this is why there can never be one cure for all types of cancer. There's 200 or more types of cancer, and they all need different treatment. How you treat a prostate cancer is completely different than how you would treat something like a lymphoma. So they're different types of cancers. They don't respond to the same. And here's the kicker. You could have breast cancer, all right, do all your chemotherapy, everything for breast cancer, turn around 5 years later, have a completely different type of cancer. All right, so there's different types of cancer. So when people tell you that, there's one secret thing, or that such a medicine kills all types of cancer, or some natural whatever cures cancer, absolutely not true. All right, cancer can develop in any organ, should say any, sorry you guys there, should say in any organ of any tissue. And here's another kicker. You can have more than one type of cancer develop in an organ. So you can have a cancer that develops on the outside of the organ and on the inside of the organ. Like, what a ripoff. Alrighty, so we're going to go through what some of the terminology of cancer is. Right, so when you hear people talk about the different types of cancer, it'll be the different types of terminology, or the different, it's the different terminology here. So if somebody has a carcinoma, what they have is a cancer that's in the skin or the lining of the organs. So if you have a carcinoma of the liver, you've got a cancer that's in the lining of the liver, or a carcinoma of the heart. You've got a cancer in the lining of the heart. If you've got skin cancer, you've got carcinoma, because you literally have cancer of the skin. So carcinoma is a cancer of the skin. So another type of cancer is called a sarcoma. And a sarcoma is cancer that's in any supportive tissue or any of the connective tissue. So if you've got it, like, it's kind of odd, but if you ever get it in any of the cartilage or ligaments or anything like that. So a melanoma is a bone marrow plasma cell. So this is going to be found in the bone marrow, in the plasma cells of the bone marrow, a melanoma. A leukemia is going to be found in cells of the bone marrow that make white blood cells. Alrighty? And they've come a long way in treating a lot of these cancers, like we said, compared to even I'll say 10 years ago. Okay, and then a lymphoma, we have a system in our body called the lymph system, and that helps with immunity. So if you have a lymphoma, this is a cancer that forms in the glands or the cells of the lymphatic system. Alrighty, I probably should have divided this up into two, but almost done. So how do we diagnose cancer? Well, if you have a problem, your doctor is going to ask for a blood test or urine test or any other type of fluid test from your body. Right? There's a bunch of different types of blood tests that they can do. You may also be sent for some imaging. And again, people may say, oh my God, you're going to send me for an x-ray when I already have cancer, but we need to use the x-rays or the CAT scans or a nuclear image in order to find out exactly where the cancer is and what type it is, because that will determine what the treatment is. Okay, so we can use various imaging techniques. So things like an x-ray or an ultrasound or a CAT scan. This should say a CT scan in here. We don't really call it a CAT scan anymore. An MRI. Or you may get a nuclear image, so where you actually swallow a radioactive substance, a radioactive glucose that passes out of your body really, really quickly, doesn't do anything, and a camera actually picks up where the cells are glowing. And again, remember we said cancer cells divide very, very quickly, so they're gobbling up glucose to help with cell division, and where the cancer cells are will actually show up on a nuclear image as being a hot spot. All right, the other thing people get sent for is a biopsy. So if you hear people saying, oh, I just had a mammogram, which is basically an x-ray of the breast, and now I have to go for a biopsy, what they're going to do is they're going to use a needle, or there's three ways they can do it. So what they'll do is they're going to take a little sample of the cells, and they're going to look at it under the microscope. So actually take the cells out of this little spot that they're worried about and take a look at the cells. So you can get a needle biopsy where they stick a great big needle in and pull out some of the cells. They do freezing first though. You can do endoscopic, so if it's something down, in your esophagus, they put an endoscope down and they take a little pinch of the cells that are down there and bring that back up. Or sometimes they need to do surgery, so they need to get in and take a little sample of the mass as well. So what kind of things are they looking for in a biopsy? Well, they are looking at, remember we were looking at the size and the shape of the cells earlier, and I hope we get time to get back at school at some point so you guys can actually look at some cells. So if you're going to become a lab tech, maybe you're a lab tech that's going to be looking at and trying to figure out if cells are cancerous. They use a lot of computer imaging now to do this, a lot of artificial intelligence to do this, but there's nothing better than the human eye to detect cancer. So they're going to look at the size and shapes of the cells. So we've seen what normal cells look like in cancerous cells. So they're going to look and see if any of those cells are different. And they're going to look to see if there's an increase or decrease in the number of cells compared to the normal number that should be there. So if they're all clumpy compared to a normal little sample, so an increase or decrease of the number of cells. And they're also going to look to see if those cells are distorted, because remember those cancer cells, they're all wonky looking, so they're going to look at that as well. The next thing they're going to be looking at as well is the size and the shape of the nucleus. If you remember again, the nuclei of the cancer cells, sometimes there was 2 in one cell, sometimes there's 3 in one cell. They're darker, they're bigger, sometimes they're misshapen, they've got more than one nucleolus in them. So what they're looking for is to see if there's an increased number of nuclei, which is plural of nucleuses, and are they darker than normal? Right? And the last thing they're going to look at is the cells, the clump of cells. So are the cells, how's the arrangement of the cells? Are they nicely spread out and all respectful of each other? Or are they in big clumps where they're all clumped all over each other? So they look at the arrangement of cells to see if they form clumps. All right. Couple more slides and we are finished. So how cancer is treated. So again, remember I said there's different types of cancer, and they do all the screening because they want to know how can we treat this cancer the best. And early screening is always the best, all right? Because if you can catch a cancer while it's still small and only in one spot, you can probably or hopefully treat it less aggressively and have a greater chance of it actually being cured. All right, so cancer being treated depends on the location and the type of cancer. Doggone it, all this came up at once. All right, so you can see here, all right, really, really easy. You're probably going to ignore me now because you're just going to be writing this down because you're so fed up hearing this, which I don't blame you. Okay, so surgery, we remove the cancerous tumor using surgery. Even if you have your warts removed, that would be kind of considered as being surgery. All right, chemotherapy, we're going to use drugs in order to kill those cancer cells. There's what they've had really good luck with now is doing a combination chemotherapy. So you're not just getting one drug, you're getting a combination of different drugs that do different things to the cancer cells. Radiation, so they literally zap the cancer with a laser beam, high-powered laser beam. So things like a lot of brain tumors are treated this way. Hormonal therapy, so something like breast cancer or prostate cancer, they'll use a hormonal therapy, like an anti-testosterone drug for prostate cancer to try to slow those prostate cells down. And what they've really, it's very, very crazy expensive. Sometimes $10,000 per dose for immunotherapy, but we've come a long way with this targeted therapy, which is immunotherapy, which are living cells that are injected that will target right down into cancer cells. It'll ignore the normal cells, but it'll find the cancer cells and go in there and help to kill them. Doesn't work for everything. They've had some really good luck with some lymphomas and some of the prostate cancers. All right, second last slide, because you're not going to have to write the last one down. Well, you can if you want to, but you don't have to write the last one down. So how are we going to prevent getting cancer? We've gone through this 45-minute long, probably longer if some of you have had to stop thing. So let's try to not even have to worry about getting cancer in the first place. All right, so prevention. Don't smoke. Massively huge one. Even marijuana, big problem. Anything that goes into your lungs besides air, all right, shouldn't be in your lungs. Basically, that's it. All right, make sure you're eating well. So make sure you've got a nice diet with lots of green vegetables. You don't want food sitting in your digestive system for too long, right? You want it moving through quickly. So if there are any carcinogens in your food, one of the things I find is burnt meat. Burnt fat on meat is actually carcinogen. So great, have a great big steak. I'm not saying don't have it. Cut off the burnt fat bits, which sometimes taste really good, but cut them off anyway. And make sure you have a big green leafy vegetable salad with that, so that when you get that meat to pass through your system fairly quickly, and it's not sitting there exposing your intestines to these carcinogenic particles. Okay, make sure you get exercise. All right, you're moving your body, you're getting lots of exercise, lots of fresh air, lots of turnover of cells. Make sure if there's a vaccine that's offered that you get it. Okay. Make sure you use sun protection. We talked about this. You know, you do need a little bit of sunshine. I'm not saying don't get no sunshine, but make sure you are covered up and sunscreened up, and you don't get massive big sunburns. All right. A lot of people say, oh, I always get a nice little base coat because that will, you know, protect me from getting sunburns. But if you've got a base coat of a tan, you've already done some damage to you. It's like you've put the house on fire, but you're using a little bucket to put it out. All right. You don't need a base coat. And the last thing is when cancer screening is provided, make sure you take advantage of the cancer screening and make sure you get medical care. So if you're unsure about something, make sure you get medical care, that someone looks at what's wrong or what you think is wrong. And sometimes you get all paranoid about something, it ends up being nothing. All right, but you just should make sure you're getting proper medical care. Now, the cancer screening, not such a big thing for younger people, but when you hit 50, bam, they hit you with the prostate exam and the breast exam and the colon exam and the, what's the other one? There's 3. You get 3. Can't remember the other one. I said breast, prostate, colon, and one more. Yeah, I'll remember it later. Okay, so just make sure you get all those done. All right, so the last page, you don't have to take down the information. It's not currently updated, so this is from last semester. All right, but just to freak you out a little bit. All right, so Canadian statistics. So this is from the cancerinformation.ca, cancer statistics. All right, so again, you don't have to write this down, but you can if you want. So an estimated 225,800 new cases of cancer and 83,400 deaths from cancer will occur in Canada in 2020. So just to make 2020 even better, 83,400 people died from cancer. Alrighty? On average, 617 Canadians will be diagnosed with cancer every day. Now, this can be something as simple as skin cancer as well, all right? So a lot of people, the statistics say 1 out of 10 people are going to end up with cancer, so I don't totally want to freak you out. And with a lot of skin cancers, what ends up happening is you just have the cancerous cells scraped off. So they scrape up enough of your skin to try to remove that cancer. My mom's had lots of areas of skin cancer taken off her face. More than half of the new cases will be lung, breast, colorectal, and prostate cancers. And again, with lung, like we know how to prevent lung cancer, right? If you've got the breast cancer that's genetic, that's horrible. Okay, you have some decisions to make, but we know for sure. All right, just don't freaking smoke, and we can cut down on all those cancers. Okay, about 2 in 5 Canadians will develop cancer in their lifetime, and 1 in 4 will die of the disease. And right now, here we go again. Lung cancer is the leading cause of death from cancer in Ontario. And again, a lot of those cases, I'm not going to say all of them. There's always the rare person who ends up with lung cancer who's never smoked a day in their life. And that's one of those question mark kind of things, all right? But it's the leading cause of death from cancer in Ontario. So if everybody quit smoking, that wouldn't be the leading cause of death anymore for people in Ontario. And it would save the healthcare system a whole heck of a lot of money and save a lot of families a lot of sadness. All right, that's a massively long video. Bless you for being able to get through that. All right, until next time.